right. Welcome back to the Partnership Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. Absolutely fired up for today's guest, someone I've known as a friend and respected for years, the pipeline king, who we're finally getting on the show, Marco De Paulis. Marco is currently the Senior Director of Partnerships at Loop Returns in the e-commerce and retail space. And if you spend any time at all in the partnerships world, especially agency and e-commerce, you've definitely come across his work and his name. What I love about Marco is he's anti-fluff. He's a real operator. He's built partner programs from 0 to 1. He's made them drive real pipeline, real revenue, and real retention. This episode, I promise, is going to be practical. We're going to talk a lot about what actually works, what breaks when you start to scale, and where partner leaders tend to lie to themselves, and we're going to try to fix those things. Marco, so excited to welcome you to the show.
So excited to be here, man. Really, really appreciate you bringing me on.
Amazing. Well, look, we're at the end of the year here in 2025, so I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule as your team continues to crush heading into the new year. But we have a fun conversation for you. We start every episode with 5 quick-hitting questions just to get you warmed up and give the audience an opportunity to learn a little bit about you. And then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. First things first, you spent a lot of years in the logistics and retail space. What's a habit you picked up in logistics that people outside of that world might find completely unhinged?
I would say, so I've always been very thoughtful about timing, being on time, being early is being on time. And I've only become more obsessed with ETAs and arrival windows and bothering probably my friends and family more than I even used to, just to like get the status update as to where things are at and where they are on their way in transit, all those sorts of things. So it's not necessarily helped my relationship maybe with some of those folks, but yeah, a little bit more of an obsession on the timing.
That's a great one. I mean, I spent far less time in the logistics supply chain world than you did, but even the time I wasn't, I was like, holy cow, like everything is to the minute, right? Like 1 minute of delay here has just such massive downstream impact. So I definitely think
hard to shake that understanding.
Yeah, it really is. My wife, like I'm such a clumsy person. I do so many things wrong, but like the one thing I'm a stickler on is like being on time for things. So if my wife's listening, I'm sorry. Cool. All right. Second question for you, Marco. What's the first metric that you look at if you want to know if a partner program is actually healthy? Put it another way. If I just drop you into any partner program and say, hey, Marco, I'm going to give you one metric and only one metric. And if you look at it, you should have a lot of information about how the health of that program is going.
Mm-hmm. I would want to, I don't know if I'm going to hit you with like an exact metric, Chris, but generally I want to look at like the representation of and diversification of the partners that are contributing to those numbers. Said another way.
I like that. Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah. Just avoid too heavy of concentration from any single or even like group of partners, because anything can happen, right? And so you just got to mitigate the risk.
Yeah, I like that. And we'll talk later about that because it is a fine balance, as you know, even better than me. Of like, on one hand, you're right. Like if you put all your eggs in one basket, if that basket sours, you're screwed. But also, we both know the penalty of like trying to work with everybody. I think we've both been honest about how we've made those mistakes. So totally a fair balance, but we'll talk more about that later. Cool. Next one, Marco, look, I look at you as just like this incredible leader. Everyone I know who's reported to you just absolutely loves and sings your praises. So curious from your perspective, what's the most rewarding part about being a leader and what's the most challenging, if you can be candid?
The most rewarding is, excuse me, sorry. Let me start over with that one, Chris, just because of that choke up.
Yeah.
The most rewarding part about being a leader in the space is seeing the evolution and growth of your team and playing a little bit of a part in that and going through the coaching and guiding and then seeing them come out on the other side, just doing better work. And then seeing them succeed. It's just, it's an incredible feeling. I think the most challenging part is, look, I don't think, this is new for me or a lot of people out there necessarily who are in the management space, but you get close with your colleagues and the folks on your team and you develop incredible rapport and great relationships. And it's challenging to balance those healthy, great relationships that are very friendly and cordial, while also, sometimes like having to get a little bit harsh in some conversations around feedback and just generally like pushing and holding them accountable and things like that. So it's a very fine, line to walk and balance. And you want to make sure that you have a great relationship, but you don't get too friendly, too cordial, too nice, too kind, so that you can't have those challenging and difficult conversations at the same time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's basically the exact type of answer I'd give on both sides. I love seeing the team evolve, start to hit quota, hit new income milestones, build their own credibility and visibility in the space. So I love that. But certainly on the challenge side, that certainly resonates. For me, I think, I don't know if you're familiar with Kim Scott. She has this famous book, Radical Candor, where she's like, look, leadership comes down to two axes, right? Challenge directly, which is like having that backbone, to your point, and then also being empathetic. Her hypothesis is like it's relatively intuitive to become empathetic. Like most of us are not assholes, right? And we care deeply for our team, and clearly you and I both have that. It took me so long to figure out the backbone piece, because to your point, it's like you have this great rapport, you're so close with your team, they trust you implicitly, you shield them from all the BS above you. So I found that I set myself up for failure in my first management gig because I was so hard on the empathy side, right? Which they love. But then as second, like, stakes got higher, performance was starting to drop, and I had to like change who I was to them. They're like, whoa, who the hell is this guy? Right. So I'm just curious, like, what did that transition look like for you, Marco, where you had to go from, okay, you're a great person, you care so deeply for your team, so you're always empathetic, but now you got to be direct. Now you have to have backbones, put people on pips, potentially having to let people go, which is obviously, really difficult thing. So just curious, what did that transition look like, if you can open up the hood?
I think about it in two ways. I think in the first way, it's to maintain some consistency when having not necessarily like the feedback or challenging conversations, but maintain consistency in when you're discussing with your team, focusing on the human aspect, but specifically the consistency around staying on top of metrics, on goals, on like the meat and substance of your role, your responsibilities. And as long as you always have that as a bit of a foundation in all of your conversations with your team, then it doesn't come off weird, to your point earlier, Chris, like when you're always, having a good time with your team, and then at some point you have to get into that. It makes it less, confusing or bipolar, seeming, I guess, to your earlier point. I think that's the one piece I would mention. Second piece is looking at feedback and looking at, sort of challenging your team and maybe a way that doesn't always come off as fun. And looking at that as, you need to build them and help them and help them realize and understand what those opportunities are. And if you're not going to do that, you're not helping them grow. You're not helping them develop. And while sometimes it's hard in the moment, if you take that glass half full approach and you take that empathetic approach and make sure you are backing up your statements with like, this is my intention and this is how I want to help you grow, I think that's really, really important, rather than it just being just a challenging feedback conversation without having that, sort of long-term empathetic goal as a part of it.
Yeah, we appreciate you sharing that. I think any manager or wannabe manager listening to that, I think that's really sound advice. I think, that's the key, is like, look, it can't just be coming from nowhere for no reason. Like tough feedback as an example. Like, what is it in service of, is how my mentors taught me. And it's like, look, like I know you're ambitious. I know you want to get to this level. Well, I'm telling you from experience, like if you want to get to this level, you're going to have to like, work on X or work on Y. So like, that's why I'm giving you this tough love. But to your point, you need to earn that right and trust, but the more kind of it can just become a part of your culture to be giving feedback on the fly, as opposed to like what a lot of people do, especially first time managers like myself, is like, oh, I'll just wait to the annual or quarterly performance reviews, and then I'm going to finally have the courage to like tell them that tough feedback. Like, no one wants to be blindsided. Best leaders I ever had, I never saw anything surprising in I could almost predict to a T what my performance review is going to be. Right? Like I could remember, I knew what Phil was going to say. I wasn't surprised by anything because he always was so direct on the fly. Yeah. So I totally resonate with that. Way to do it. Cool. All right. Well, that was a good little side tangent, but that was an important conversation. So fourth or the fifth quick hitting question. And to be honest, this might be the most important one of the entire interview. What's the correct answer to the best way to make a Philly cheesesteak? And as a bonus point, what's your favorite spot to get one?
So this is going to be a little bit of a polarizing response. Especially if you're a Philly person. I do not like the whiz cheese on a cheesesteak. I think the only way to do a proper cheesesteak is to do some Cooper Sharp on it. Okay. But, there's a lot of old school folks that are going to say whiz every single day, 9 times out of 10. So that's my opinion. And I think that's like the more modern cheesesteak approach, Chris. And so maybe, call me millennial or whatever. But that's my take. I think the best It's not Pats and Geno's, I'll tell you that. And that's like what every, blog will tell you if you're going to go to Philly and get a cheesesteak. I love Cleaver's. It's like an amazing sandwich shop, and it's sort of like tucked away and not very flashy. I think it's one of the most consistent spots in the city for any kind of sandwich, but frankly, you go there and get a cheesesteak and it's going to crush.
We love that. We love a good shout out. So Cleavers, if you're listening to the Partnership Mastermind podcast, thank you, by the way. But Marco's giving you a big shout out there. And we had Bob Moore, CEO of Crossbeam, on the call a couple months ago, and he also is anti-whiz. So you're in good company. Cool. All right, let's get you out on this, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. So I was reading some recommendations and testimonials on your LinkedIn profile, because that's what we do to prepare for this pod. And I couldn't help but notice Adam Kitchen, founder of Magnet Monster, Klaviyo Elite partner, who a lot of folks are familiar with. He described you as, quote, by far the most dedicated partner manager he's ever worked with back when you were in IC, truly committed to the success of clients and focused on the best outcomes for both parties. Quote, I totally agree with that. I think you are absolutely known as someone who is deeply partner and customer centric. So my point blank question is, like, where does that come from? Like, obviously you work towards these things, you work hard, obviously, but like, why are you way above average when it comes to like customer and partner centricity? Because a lot of us say we are, but candidly, we're all not. So like, where did Marco develop that?
I developed it, Chris, working directly at agencies and being responsible for the sales and then basically overseeing the delivery. And I was in situations where projects were awesome, and those were projects I sold, and the delivery went great and everyone's so happy. And then I've seen the complete opposite, where I've sold that project that I scoped, that I came, up with all the solutioning, and maybe things didn't go well in the delivery. And then the outcome is a client that's essentially pissed at me, and it's my reputation on the line. That paired with just like, I naturally am a devil in the details. And I truly give a shit about what's going to happen for these brands, whatever, product or service that like I'm essentially responsible for driving demand for. And so when I worked with Adam and back when I was in IC, I took that empathy and that understanding and that sort of responsibility into every single thing that I did. And it came off, authentic for them, to the point where I was almost like doing work for them in a delivery capacity, almost like an extension of their team. And they obviously appreciate that for many, many reasons. And at the end of the day, that helps them deliver more value to their clients. And that helps me ensure the product is delivering value for the shared clients that we have. And frankly, I don't think there's a better outcome than that.
I love that. I think that's very interesting. So a key takeaway here is like just Marco's real experience, client side, both pre-sale, like doing the actual transaction, and then actually implementing. I think that's really interesting. I'm getting that experience now as a first-time entrepreneur, 8 months in, of like, I have to sell. And then when I sell, guess what? I don't pass it off to a CSM. Like, I am delivering what I am selling. So I have recently developed a newfound appreciation for that. I think that candidly is a challenge for a lot of partner managers who don't have a lot of AE experience or even CSM experience, because you're not that customer facing in like the majority of partner manager roles. So here's a quick side question actually for you, Marco. What advice would you give to partner managers who don't have this deep client-facing experience? How can they simulate? How can they start to get those at-bats so they can develop a deeper appreciation for the actual customer's point of view? Because we know that's so critical.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I would go find the closest like front lines you can to the customer, whether that's within your own org and, sit in some sales calls, sit in some, customer success, merge success calls, listen to the great conversations, listen to the negative conversations. We all have access to Gong and things like that. Take some time to really get closer to it and understand what the implications are. And then on the flip side too, I think agency partners are always open to getting you in closer. Again, go sit on whatever calls you can, go into their office, get shoulder to shoulder with their delivery teams and hear what their, feedback is and their challenges and all of that. The closer you can get to that merchant touch point, that end consumer touch point, the better of an understanding you're going to have. And of course, how that sort of funnels through the partner business as well.
I love that. I think that's great advice. Get close to the customer. I think also spend some time with your CSMs at your own company. A lot of you working at like SaaS vendors, they know their customer. What you want to develop is appreciation for like a day in the life of the users of your actual platform. If you have a deep understanding of that, it's a huge competitive edge. And the last point there is, At my first big tech job, I was first tech partner manager at Gorgeous, who obviously Marco. And one of your like key onboarding tasks that you have to complete is you have to complete 50 customer support tickets for a real brand,
Oh, it's awesome.
right? As a support agent, right? And they put guardrails on it, and that was terrifying for me. That was the hardest thing I had to do in onboarding, but it taught me so much. I'm like, wow, like this is how people really talk. First of all, people are awful, by the way. Like, stop harassing customer support teams as a side note. But to your point, that gave me an instant glimpse, and I was like, okay, this is how our users use our platform, and this is what they struggle with. So I really like what you said there.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, that's a really cool tactic. I didn't know they did that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, look, that was the fun quick five. Now we're going to get into the operator's origin story. We always do this with each guest just to get a little bit of your background, how you got into partnerships, because Lord knows none of us actually went to school for partnerships. So like you as well, you didn't start your career saying, I want to work in partnerships. You were leading sales at agencies. And at somewhere along the way, you discovered tech partners like Acquia, a Shopify that clearly changed the directory. So walk us through that like moment. When did you realize that tech partnerships fundamentally changed the game compared to pure sales, and you knew that you were onto something?
Yeah. When you're selling agency services, you are building repeatable, stacks essentially. And as I started to, once I, fell into those roles and I was emailing the same people like, hey, we're going to be recommending you guys to this one and then to this one and then to this one, started to think like, well, I would love to get something from them too. Like, a good, healthy relationship is equitable. They obviously have thousands of clients. How do I maybe tap into that? Is that something I could even do or ask for? And I started to, just try and get closer to the contacts over there. And then sure and behold, they started to bring me up and get me into those conversations. And so it happened a little bit at that first agency, the second agency I worked at, which was an open source development agency. And we did a lot of work with Acquia and open source development on Drupal. And then that's like, I saw a little bit of success with that, but it just like completely took off when I joined a Shopify agency. And a lot of it does have to do with the ecosystem itself. The way that, the Shopify space is, it's inherent to be partner centric and to be referring and sharing and driving mutual success across a variety of tools and vendors. Right. And so once I joined the Shopify side, it just completely took off. So I'm really glad I started to develop that. A little bit of the experience, but the curiosity around it, because then I really was able to take advantage of it when I jumped over to Shopify space.
Love that. I mean, you've been an OG in the game, had a huge impact on just kind of pioneering like what great partnership strategy looks like in the e-com landscape. Now let's get into you actually building partner programs across agencies, SaaS, logistics, and certainly in the post-purchase space. So we're big on talking about like early mistakes and hard lessons. I think that our audience certainly resonates well and responds well to that. So you've been, very candid in your career about the mistakes you made early on, which is something I appreciate about you. So your first question here is, you said one of your biggest mistakes early on was scaling too fast, too many partners too quickly. So just curious, what specifically went wrong when you did that, and what can our audience learn from that?
I think what specifically went wrong was that I missed opportunities to have more output with almost less work. What ends up happening is you start to glorify the count of partners over and like this comes back to my very first point I was making to you, Chris, is the sort of sweet spot, if you can find a sweet spot of how much revenue is coming from how many partners and sort of what share of your overall partner program does that look like? Because you get to a point where, okay, it's always about bringing on new partners, great. Like they're not always just going to stay active. They're not always going to be referring leads consistently, maybe like they were in the first 6 months you started to work with them and started to turn it on. And so you get to a point, I found myself at a point where you're just constantly grinding, activating. And then you have less time for the ones that have shown great success for you as a partner manager or as a partner leader. And then they start to get quiet. And it's like you're constantly refilling the top of the funnel while you have a leaky bucket on the bottom. And it's like, it's not great for your, ability to really truly grow like in a sustainable way. It's not great for your energy levels, your work-life balance, any of it. Right. So that's when I realized, I was like, wait a second, we have a lot of partners and we don't really have much of a concentration anywhere, aside from, maybe a select few here and there. And it's like, what are we doing? Why are we trying to spread ourselves so thin?
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone listening, we've all probably struggled with that of just trying to add too many partners. Sometimes you're driving it yourself. Sometimes your boss or your company is just like, to your point, glorifying like adding partners just to add partners. But we all know that it doesn't work. And, going back to like the challenges of a leadership position, I remember one of the tougher conversations I had like a superstar tech partner manager. They were crushing, but they had like 9 partners, I remember, but 3 of them were just like delivering nothing. And I just hired this, like, let's call it tier 2 tech partner manager to kind of build like the mid to long tail. And so I wanted to like pass these 3 underperforming partners to this other person. And then my star tech partner manager is like, well, why are you doing that? Like, no, those are mine. It's like, well, let's take a look at the numbers now. You are crushing. Really, only 3 of your 9 partners are delivering like 80% of your quota, right? But those 3 are delivering nothing, but you're taking regular calls, but you don't have the time to really like scale them. So like they have a lot of signal, so we're going to pass to someone else. And like this was a very tenuous thing, right? Because you have, I think early in your career, you have this like, not a possessive in a bad way, but you're like, oh, those are my partners. I have to make them work. They will work, right? So I'm just curious, did you ever go through that yourself of like this fallacy in your head? It's like, well, theoretically, every partner in my portfolio should be productive and it's my job to make them productive. But it's hard to develop this concept of opportunity cost, which I found for me at least didn't come until I had just had experience, like just years of getting my ass kicked.
100%, man. I think it probably happens to the majority of people in this role, frankly. And it's, sure. I don't think it's a malicious, right, thing. I think it's a hopeful, glass half full, but almost like naive take on it, which also requires a little bit of like hard internal, reflection and conversations to admit, maybe that like I'm not doing enough because I have so much to do over here. And sometimes, it's almost like you have to take a step back to then take a few steps forward rather than, just trying to like push on this thing that's just it's not going to change in the way that it's being done or being managed or handled today. Something that we've seen actually with decent success, Chris, is even just like doing a swap of a partner manager. Sometimes it's just like a fresh face, a fresh approach. It has nothing to do with the abilities or whatever it may be of that person, but it's like, again, take a step back. Yeah, we're going to have, we've made good progress. We're maybe out of 4 out of 10, but we've been stuck at that 4. Let's take a step back to a 2 or a 3, get back to the basics. Hey, let's swap a couple partners between these partner managers and see what happens. And usually actually like that has a great sort of, outcome that you wouldn't even expect. And it's, call it personality, call it approach, call it fresh perspective, a little bit of a reset, whatever that may be. It's amazing how well that can work sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've seen success with that as well. I think just to be fair to yourself, I think like you have to have like a great leader like yourself, Marco, who A, has the foresight to do that, but B, have like the delicacy of navigating that. And I think candidly, there's a lot of leaders who just would crap the bed on making that type of change. They would just do it ruthlessly. And that's how you can really burn trust with their team. So any leader listening, the way Marco described it, that is a very sound approach that you can take. You just got to be delicate in how you handle it, right? Because you got personalities involved.
Thankfully, I also have a great team that like will recognize that on their own sometimes too. So
fair.
To give them credit.
Well, that's best case. That's how you know you got good people. Yep. Cool. Well, look, so that's your origin story and kind of like humble beginnings. And now let's get into like, okay, you're scaling, you're delivering impact. This section is on one of the topics that you and I are both passionate about, which is like compensation, quotas, KPIs, etc. So we're going to talk about partner influence. So you've talked a lot about building very specific partner influence SOPs centered around a variety of types of influence. So I'd love for you to walk us through that framework. So in your opinion, like what are the types of partner influence and why did you feel the need to codify this as you started to build your partner programs?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the second part first, Chris, because
sure.
I think like that foundation is critical. Influence can be a very fuzzy, fluffy, word.
It's controversial.
And that's where I was like, okay, well, first, before we can even actually make this a real thing, I need to make sure the leadership understands what this is. So we have to define it. But it looks very different in so many different, ways and contexts. And so my first step was, all right, let me break out the different types of influence and try and sort of stack rank a little bit in terms of their impact and get the sign off and approval from the other go-to-market teams and leaders. And so we have 3 types of influence. And again, like very specific as to what constitutes this type of influence and what does not. The first is an endorsement. And so that is somebody saying something positive about you in some context while you are in the sales process. Key point right there. Second is that they are active in the sale with you. And so that can be, co-selling or sort of back channeling. I have, sort of subsets of all these categories, Chris.
Yep.
And then the third is more of where it's kind of a bit of a broader category, which we're just calling like verbal influence. And it's not, what that means is it's not necessarily like we don't have receipts for it. And so we look at that in a little bit of a different way and put a different magnifying glass to it. Again, to make it really clear when we are measuring these things that we're hearing that this stuff is happening. We may not be able to get receipts for one reason or another. And so we mark those as such. So I can pause there in terms like letting you know what the sort of types of influence we look at, and I can go a little deeper on anything you want to hear.
That's great. I think that's like a very sound model. I've implemented similar models. I have two questions. One is more about like receptivity and like acceptance by non-partnership stakeholders within the org. And then the second question will be more like very, very tactical, nerdy, that I think you'll like. So sorry. The first question is, how do you actually operationalize influence in a way that sales, CS, RevOps, especially leadership, actually trust the data? Again, I had Bob Moore, CEO of Crossbeam, on the podcast, and he's really evangelizing this concept of like, look, we can't create metrics that the CFOs and the CROs and the CEOs don't understand. So like, first point blank question, Marco, how do you increasingly get influence to be an accepted metric? Because candidly, in my experience and what I've seen in all these other companies, you get beaten down hard for a while before the company really rallies around it, because I think a lot of these other stakeholders are like, oh, partnerships is just trying to make up this metric to justify their impact. So just curious, like, what's the most honest take you can give us on like what that actually looks like from day one to the point where it's like, oh, nope, the whole company really buys into this metric?
Yeah, I would say you actually can't start by necessarily defining it and creating a goal for it. You have to start by like just doing it and making it happen for your sales reps or for your account managers and whatever that is, and build the proof there, and then have them almost champion it from their perspective. And that's, again, I came into Loop. I'm almost at 2 years now. Like, they were doing this a little bit, but it wasn't as fleshed out as when I came in, I had to define it and put it together. And then we started a goal on it after that. So they were doing influence for some time, but it just wasn't as concrete. And the sales reps in particular loved it. They loved hopping on a call with someone at Gorgeous to talk about an account that they're working, and so, an active sale that a Loop account executive was trying to push through. They loved hearing, positive sentiments from our partners, whether our partners are emailing our prospects or, saying it in a call or a QBR and then sharing with us like that transcript of that recording. That goes a long way. And so the more we were able to do it for them, and show them that it had value and get them to appreciate and then champion it, then it was like, look, they love it. You can ask any sales rep here. Here's 5 quotes from our top sales reps as to why influence is important to them. And I am now going to define these different types of influence that we're able to accomplish with varying degrees of impact. And then I'm going to, push and basically propose that we set a goal around this. And this is how we're going to objectively say influence happened or it did not happen. And I probably, Chris, to be honest, go a little bit over the top sometimes in my SOPs, because I look at it as, to Bob's point and your point earlier, if you don't have trust from a CFO, if you don't have trust from RevOps that you're measuring things as objectively as possible, then it's going to get questioned and there's doubt. And anytime doubt surrounds what you're doing, what you're measuring, and your metrics and your goals, then like you're in for a bad time. And so that's why I take it really seriously to like really clearly, articulately define the objective output and substance of what a different type of influence is, or what each type of influence is.
Yeah, I mean, if that was the whole interview, this would be extremely valuable, because influence is a hot topic. It comes up in almost every conversation I have in advising type situations. So one thing I loved in just listening is like, I think from a leader perspective, so if you're like a team level leader like Marco in partnerships function, the way you're approaching influence is like there's 2 key sets of stakeholders that you have to work and nurture. The champions are the AEs, right? They're boots on the ground. If you are going to help them look good, you're going to help them feel like what it's like to win with partnerships. So like they're the ones you got to convince first, so to speak. And that's the bottom up approach. And then the top down is, just slowly but surely chipping away, dripping, mentioning influence, talking about influence with the leader level folks, your VP of sales, your CROs, the CFOs of the world, and just say, hey, look, I'm building this thing. I don't need you to do anything just yet, but just watch, just be ready. We're going to deliver the goods. And you're going to start hearing from the AEs, and then we're going to be able to quantify. So I think that's a really good sandwich approach. Like evangelize and beat the drums of the AEs so they can feel the wins, but also start radiating some pressure towards the leadership level. And eventually they'll meet in the middle where it's like this, the Spider-Man meme. It's like, hey, we're all aligned on influence, right? And it's a beautiful thing. Last question on this, Marco. If anyone listening right now wants to finally start to implement a influence motion from scratch starting in January, what's your best piece of advice simply to get started?
So assuming that you're doing a little bit of this already organically,
sure.
Go grab transcripts, go grab quotes and testimonials from the team, and start to bucket out like what these types of influence motions are and how valuable they are, and get the proof from the the ones that truly are going to see the value, and then use that to build your definitions of influence and be as objective as you possibly can. And again, to my point earlier about like maybe going a little bit over the top, but so that you can have bulletproof trust, is you want to push for proof. You want to push for receipts. You want to push for screenshots and transcripts and recordings. And if you have that stuff to back up what you were defining as influence, then it, as long as you have alignment on what that is and you have the receipts, then it's like, who's gonna question, who's gonna push back on it.
I think that's great. I think that's a great scrappy starting approach that will work well for you. And even in my last company, we had attribution challenges sometimes, and when it came to influence, we had to make sure that sales had verified it. So we had this like deal desk review channel that like our RevOps team owned, and whenever there was like ambiguity or conflict with whether or not influence is real or not, like we would just like start like a case. Right. And like partner manager would submit the evidence. AE on the case would like submit their claim to just, dispute it or not, or prove it. And it sounds like overboard. We'd only do this for like the biggest deals, but it did work. Like it was like, hey, look, the proof is unequivocal, and the AE knows better than anyone. Right. In my view, the way that my latest influence programs run is like only an AE can approve whether or not influence was real. Right. A partner manager alone cannot make that claim because it'd be incentivized to claim it for every deal. Right, where the worst thing is an AE's like, wait, what? No, there was no influence on this deal.
Totally.
Then you look foolish. Cool.
Totally.
Cool. Well, look, this is a nice segment to the next segment, which is what I'm calling the internal adoption battlefield. And we both know that internal enablement is critical. And you've said that it's arguably the hardest part about partnerships, and certainly in a partnership leadership position. So I'm just curious, like, how do you personally approach creating champions and strong ties across sales, marketing, customer success, product, and finance? Like, what is Marco's playbook? We'll start as a leader level first, and then I'll ask you a follow-up for the ICs listening, because it's critical for them to be doing the same things. But first, from a leader level perspective, how do you go about that?
I'm going to steal your analogy from earlier, Chris, which is that sandwich approach. It's just, frankly, for almost anything you're trying to get done, how do you get some buy-in from the boots on the ground, the ones who truly see the value in it? And how do you tell some of those stories while also then try and go rally and build alignment at the top, and then marry those two things? At the top, let me just double click on that piece a little bit more. The key thing is to align goals. You cannot get look, everyone's ridiculously busy. That's only getting harder and harder and worse over time. And so asking anyone for favors, asking anyone to like do more work, do more of this thing, and row with you in your boat is not going to happen unless they can benefit from it as well. And so you have to make sure there's alignment around whatever their goals are, whatever their OKRs are, where truly the rubber meets the road, to then, okay, I can actually figure out a way to do this with you because we're going to benefit, you're going to benefit, great. But that leader can sort of only do so much. And that's why you have to take that bottoms up approach as well. They can, maybe implement some OKRs. They can say, do this thing. They can, maybe rah. But if you don't have people adopting it on the bottom, right, the boots on the ground, if you don't have people championing it and, sharing their wins, their successes, their testimonials, then you don't get the mass adoption. You might get a couple, right? Because, they're good students and they listen, they want to do what they're supposed to do. But ultimately, like, the mass adoption is you have to do both of those things. And particularly on the bottom, like, you need some organic ways to expand the adoption.
Yeah, no, I think that's a sound approach. You definitely need to be working both personas, like the senior level folks. Candidly, I think that was something I made mistakes on in recent posts for myself, is just like being a little naive. I was taking this approach like, okay, as long as my team is delivering the goods, people will respect that. But it's like, no, like people need to feel like a response. Like you need to help people feel like what it's like to win with you, right? Just because they think you're doing a good job doesn't mean that they're invested in you all of a sudden, right? So like you have to plant those seeds. So then the final question for you on this one, Marco, is for ICs listening, whether you're IC or senior level IC, can you talk about the importance of becoming more visible and pervasive throughout the org? And then as a part two, what tip would you give them to start to do what you've described as a leader level, but as an IC level? So the importance of like building your credibility and visibility within an org as the org starts to grow. And then how do you effectively multi-thread your own org, right? So you are building those relationships, again, from an IC POV.
Yeah, I think, well, from the IC level, right, you're not going to have you can't necessarily open the same leadership doors. You can't necessarily have those same conversations. And so you're really just focused on boots on the ground. And it's making as many allies as you possibly can, putting in the extra work, putting in the extra reps and effort, and developing a name for yourself, organically. I think people sniff out inauthentic stuff real quick. And people are not going to want to waste their time. Again, every IC similarly is typically overburdened, and they have a laundry list of things they got to do, numbers they got to hit. And so you're not going to get too many opportunities or too many at-bats to try and do something collaborative with them. So you really got to make sure it succeeds. And when it does, you got to tell some stories in an authentic, organic way. So, I would say, if I was to kind of summarize, like, find some folks where you can test some things out and work together. Make sure that you can control and produce as much success as you possibly can, and try and socialize it in a way that's not inauthentic, and continue to repeat that process. And you will slowly make more champions, more champions, more champions, more friends, more friends, more friends. And then you'll have a little bit of an army of allies that way, that it only gets easier over time because the trust is there. The repeatable process is there to a degree. It's not like you have to educate from square one every single time. Like, they kind of know what the drill is. So that's always been my approach.
Yeah, one thing I appreciate that is a word that keeps coming up from you is like the word authentic or authenticity. I love how steeped kind of your philosophies are in that. And I think that anyone listening should heed that. I think the authentic piece, if you really just go into every conversation with that in mind, I think that'll serve you really well. Quick fire question for you on that one, Marco. It's more on like career progression. Curious your view. Whenever I've had ICs trying to push into senior IC level, as we know, it's not just performance, right? Like hitting quota for a couple quarters in a row. Obviously, that's table stakes, but there are other things in it. I personally, and I don't know if everyone believes this, I personally have a hard time promoting someone in senior IC if I don't feel like they're visible across the org and they're felt. And again, maybe that's a contrarian view, but it's like, look, no one at a similar level to you or even +1 level to you, really across marketing, customer success, product, they don't really know who you are or what you do. And again, maybe I'm on a hill for this one, but just give me your honest take on like, when it comes to like senior level positions, which have a lot of responsibility, higher compensation bands, talk to me about your view on that, right? The importance of being visible and being felt, if I could phrase it that way.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'll join you on that hill for sure. Because it's one thing to just, stay in your lane, stay in your world, hit your number, do your thing, exceed, great. But that's not what leadership is. Leadership is building bridges. It is building allies. It is creating new, I'm going to use the worst buzzword in all corporate history, which is synergy, across people and departments and, frankly, like other worlds within an organization.
Yep.
And you have to show that you can do that. And to do it as an IC is a really great sort of indicator that, okay, they have an understanding of what it takes to be more senior and to be a leader there, and to start to build those bridges. And you want to lean into that, and you want to reward that, and you want to set the expectation that like that is what you have to do. And I think you use a great word, which is felt, not just seen, but be felt. And you want to I want to see other people across the organization shouting you out organically, again, authentically,
Yes.
because you
Yep.
just went out and did some great work without asking for anything in return for the, betterment of our business, for the betterment of their role, their customer, and it wasn't for you necessarily. Did you have an ulterior motive? Okay, great. I'm glad it worked out. But that's not how they felt. They truly felt like you went out of your way to help them and to ensure success for everyone. And so I 100% agree with you. You cannot be a senior IC, you cannot be a leader if you don't show the qualities of, getting across the org, extending hands, building bridges, and driving success.
Well, I'm glad to hear that validation because, to be honest, sometimes I've actually gotten pushback on that same topic. And I like what you said about like a proxy for this becoming reality is like people organically shouting out, which I totally agree. Another thing that I learned, which I learned quicker, was I used to like, I'm a big cheerleader, I'm a big tire pumper. Like you and me both. We had to celebrate our team. But in the early days, I was the one always like the second anyone on my team was like delivering a cool result, I would like immediately go on the relevant channels and just be like, oh, like hey everyone, blah blah blah, like look what Stacy did or look what Dylan did. And what I learned was like no, I think I'm helping them. I thought I was helping them, but like, which is they appreciate, but it's like I should empower them to be telling their own stories. And right, and again, I wish I learned this earlier on, but it's like, hey, like I encourage you to go into this channel, like we would have like a cross sales and partnerships channel, and then a cross CS and partnerships channel. Like, go tell this story. Like, I don't want them to hear it from me. I want them to hear it from you. And that was a big unlock for me, where I'm like, hey, now you're building your own credibility and visibility as well. I'm not sure if a tactic like that works for you.
I think it's a great tactic. 100% agree. I think the flip side too is you are, the voice of the team. You are the image of the team in a lot of ways. How do you make sure you're giving credit where credit's due as consistently as you possibly can? So, a lot of times, maybe not in an asynchronous environment like Slack, but you're at an all hands and you're presenting for something. You don't obviously have the opportunity to get your 3, 4, 5 teammates all visibility and time on that. You speak on their behalf to, and shout them out and give them credit. Don't say we or I, it's this person and that person and this person, and give them credit and call them out for what they have done.
Absolutely. Well, that was great. I really appreciate that conversation. I think that's a really important one. We're now at our last segment. So this is our final. We begin with a lightning round with a quick 5, and then we end with a lightning round. So we'll try to keep these ones quick to get us out here on time. This one is process versus people in an AI heavy world. Right, Marco, one thing I've appreciated is that you hold some pretty, not contrarian beliefs, but you have some strong beliefs here, which I appreciate. So again, these are rapid fire. Try to get as many through as we can in the next couple minutes. So first one, you've said human connection still trumps process, templates, and integrations, especially as AI takes over more of the work. Why do you believe that?
I believe that because relationships ultimately are the ultimate needle mover. They trump all logical decision making. I don't care what technology process, thing is there. And I know you've seen it, Chris. People will make an emotional decision and a biased decision because of a human relationship 95% of the time. And if you can
100%.
tap into that and you can lean into it and essentially like control that and use that to your benefit, you're going to win.
I really appreciate you sharing that because two things are true. I'm a huge adopter of like AI, so I don't want to come across as a hypocrite, but I'm also definitely getting the ick because it's just like, AI startups to help AI get better at making AI better. And it's like, well, what about AI to help humans be better and happier? And like candidly, building a community-based business, I'm technically benefiting from this because people are craving authentic human connections more than ever. So I actually have tailwinds to help my own business, but I totally agree with you. So
and they very much are. I agree with that.
Absolutely. So then the next question for you is, how do you intentionally preserve real human connection as partner programs scale and just complexity of everything scale? How do you still bottle that up and preserve that real human connection from your perspective?
I'll just say how we do it authentically is we spend a lot on in-person time and relationship building. It is an investment, line item that like we grow every single year. And yes, it grows in relation to like the growth of the program and all of that.
Sure.
But I say that because it's not something that should get smaller in terms of like the ratio. I think it should stay the same, if not get bigger, because you essentially are like diluting, the partner experience as you add more partners and as you scale and as you grow. And if you lose that authentic touch, then and investing in those relationships and things start to wither away. So we're continuing to double down on it. Like I just, when we jumped on the pod, I was telling you what we just did this week. We spent a ton of money getting partners in person. We didn't have to do that, but we wanted to, and we know that that goes a long way.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's something I applaud about you in particular, Loop in particular, not just on the partner side, but also on the internal side, right? Like the Loopapaloozas of the world, like investing in your team. I believe, it's hard to quantify, but I believe like one in-person meeting is worth like 10 Zoom meetings at least, right? In terms of like impact and progression of the relationships, et cetera, for your partners, for your employees. Employee attrition goes down, as we all know, right? Like, so you might have one superstar that you don't know is on the verge of quitting, and then you have some in-person thing, and then voila, they stay, and you never even know about it, right? Same thing with partners. You might have a partner's like, you know what? We're going to go work with their competitor. But then you have this in-person, like, oh shit, Loop is cooking. Like, this is awesome. Like, let's get it going. So to your point, even one major partner taking the next step or one key employee not leaving, that justifies most likely the investment you made totally. So I'm just curious if that resonates with you, Marco.
Oh, totally does. And I think to add to that, Chris, like a little bit of extra color, is you also gain so much more of a human understanding about what makes that person tick. And it all comes back together, right? All these questions and all the responses, the more you understand about a person outside of the world of work, then the better that relationship is, the more authentic, the easier it is to, is just like build on that rapport, build that relationship. And then that's what makes a difference in the future as to whether or not like you get the first intro or not compared to the other person, right? Or you are the first, idea when it comes to building out the tech stack for this client. 100%.
100%. Like, look, I candidly had to be super tough on an IC once because they were a senior IC, one of the highest paid players on my team. And they just would not step up to the plate and meet with their partners in person. And they didn't live that far from like a major city center, right? And it's like, look, like you can't have it all. You can't ask for promotions and bigger pay raises if you're not going to like step up and like, you're not present. You're not being felt within your actual partner ecosystem in your portfolio. So I think it all applies. So I like that. 2 quick hitters and then we're done, Marco. Second last one is, what partnership work should never be automated, in your opinion?
I think it comes back to the in-person stuff, man, right? Like,
sure,
don't skip on that. Don't.
Yeah.
Just because you can, find efficiencies in some of the work you're doing with AI, just because things are looking great on the surface, just because, maybe you're managing more partners and you have to try and figure out a way to like scale yourself and your time. You skip that stuff, it's going to bite you in the long run. So I don't know if that's the best answer, but I think that's a big theme, and I can't overlook that.
No, look, we don't look for perfect answers. We look for honest answers on the show. So we appreciate that. And then as a quick side note, like I agree with that. Yes. I also think it's like a very nerdy tactical one. Like, please just don't send automated, super templatized messages regularly to your tier 1 partners in your portfolio. Like, that just gives everybody the ick. Like, take the time. I'm sorry. Right? We're not all so busy that you can't take the time to write like thoughtful, personalized emails that was only written for that one person. This is just a side rant. An old man sitting on my porch. Last question, Marco, and then we're done. What's one prediction you have for how AI is going to either change the partner manager profession in 2026 or just how partner programs are built? You can pick either or, any direction, but just question is like, what's the biggest impact you see AI having in any direction you want to take that in 2026 and beyond?
I mean, what I'm really thinking about a lot, Chris, on the AI front and how it applies to everything that a partner manager does is, how do you automate the monotonous and remove the friction of having to get, sort of like the basic information across to partners. And that can be anything from, understanding where all of their history of demand is and rev share and all of the collateral, the assets. Like, if you can remove all the back and forth kind of like wasted silliness time of checking in on this, checking in on that, providing a status update on this, on that, helping somebody find some piece of collateral, some piece of information, automate as much of that as possible, make it super easy to find, searchable, promptable, and spend the time on the relationship, spend the time on the strategy, spend the time on what the goals are for everyone and how you guys are actually going to drive and get there and pull that stuff out.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there's no excuses now, certainly, because like so many partner managers will say, "Oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I go in on Monday and I have a plan, and then I get punched in the face, and then like I'm scrambling the rest of the week in like reactive mode." Well, look, to Marco's point, a lot of the monotonous stuff should be simplified and streamlined as much as possible. To Marco's point, freeing you up for the highest leverage stuff, which is in-person time with partners, face-to-face time with key stakeholders at your own company to like progress strategy, deal review, like the really important stuff. But we all know as humans, we're psychologically dispositioned to like want to be busy, right? And sometimes it makes us feel better about ourselves to just do like the tier 3 admin work. Because at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I was busy today, but you weren't impactful that day. So I think now there's so much more time for like the high impact stuff. The key is that you need to be able to lean in so you don't fall behind, because expectations are going to grow and you need to make sure your skills grow accordingly.
100%.
Cool. Well, look, this was absolutely fantastic. Certainly lived up to the hype, Marco. Can't thank you enough, especially given how busy you are at this time of the year. But look, thank you everyone for listening. And thank you, Marco, so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.